Hey y'all, I'm Ivy Odom, a test kitchen professional in the Southern Living Test Kitchen, and this is What's Cooking with Southern Living. Today, the quintessential all-star Southern classic, cornbread in a cast iron skillet. And I'm excited to dive into all of the depths of cornbread history and cornbread making today with y'all. The very first step in cornbread making is to grease your cast iron skillet and get your oven piping hot. For this cornbread recipe, I'm using a 1/4 cup of bacon drippings. If you have any small bacon crumbles in there, you're gonna want to strain it before you use it, or else it could potentially burn on the bottom of your skillet. If you happen to be vegetarian, canola or vegetable oil, or even peanut oil, all of those can stand high temperature. While your skillet and your bacon grease is heating up in the oven, you can mix up your batter. The very first thing I'm going to do is mix together cornmeal. This is fine ground cornmeal, self-rising, and some baking soda. I'm using self-rising cornmeal because it already has some leavening ingredients in it. The reason I'm adding additional baking soda to this recipe is because this recipe includes buttermilk. Any recipes that include buttermilk, you add a little bit of baking soda because the buttermilk is so acidic. The baking soda is a base. Those two things balance each other out and it creates a really, really nice flavor. I like to crack my eggs first and make sure they're broken and well whisked before I cover them up with my thick buttermilk. And this ensures that your eggs are whisked properly. Once the yolks are broken and they're lightly beaten, you can add in your buttermilk. Buttermilk comes from literally the liquid that is left over from churning cream into butter. That is how buttermilk was originally made, and it was kind of like a prized commodity back in the day, but now buttermilk is widely available. Before I put my buttermilk and eggs into my self-rising cornmeal and baking soda, in the center of my dry ingredients, I'm creating a well and then pour my wet ingredients into my dry ingredients. Slowly incorporate the wet ingredients into the dry ingredients. You want to mix this just until that buttermilk and egg moistens all of your dry ingredients. Once everything is wet, stop whisking. You don't want to overmix this. And we're going to get it into our skillet. Here we go. All of my bacon drippings are melted. I am going to swirl them around my cast iron skillet very carefully because this thing is piping hot, just so that the edges get greased with the bacon grease. Set it down and pour my wet batter into this hot grease. Now it is going to bubble, and that is exactly what you want it to do. It's going to create this nice crispy crunchy texture on the top and on the edges, and it's kind of fried, which adds such a good flavor. You can even see the bacon grease kind of come up over the edges of the batter. The edges, you can already see them starting to cook and bubble. Get this back into the oven. It's at 425 degrees, and we'll check it in about 25 to 27 minutes. Let's take a minute to talk about the history of cornbread in the South. Hundreds of years ago, the very first cornbread was actually made on open coal fires. They would mix together hot water, salt, and cornmeal, and they would cook it on an open flame in a coal. They were like, oh, maybe we need to cook this like on a vessel. They invented something called a hoe cake, which was literally cooked over an open flame on a garden hoe. That is where the term hoe cake comes from. Then we moved into open fire cooking, but inside of a vessel. The very first cast iron skillets that were used were called spiders, which are pretty similar to skillets that we use today, but they have a really, really long handle so that you could maneuver it easily over an open flame in a fireplace. What's great about cast iron cooking is that even though it takes a little while to heat up, it holds heat so well and cooks everything evenly. They are our prized treasures of the Southern kitchen, and these things are passed down through the generations. They get used so much, they basically become a non-stick skillet, especially a well-seasoned, well-used family heirloom. I think it needs about 5 or 10 more minutes, so let's pull up some comments. This What's Cooking Facebook group, I love all the opinions on cornbread. Geraldine Hurst says, food coloring. I know no one else does this, but I love color. It started as a joke for my then husband, and 34 years later, I cannot bake a plain old white cornbread unless I'm baking it for others. And yes, only white cornmeal will do. Pat Crawford, cheese and jalapeno. We have a lot of stir-ins for variations on cornbread. Cheese and jalapeno is a classic combination stir-in, and I love that. Someone else says, unlike my mom who collected bacon grease in a can on her stove, I never have it on hand. So, years ago, I learned to fry some bacon and put both the bacon crumbled and the grease in my cornbread. So good. I also only use cornmeal stone ground in Georgia, and I am a Georgia girl, so cornmeal stone ground in Georgia, they do it the old-fashioned way with the water press, and it's so amazing to watch that process if you've never done it. And then Patricia York, she says, I am not ashamed to admit that this born and bred in the South girl loves sugar in her cornbread. Y'all, that is a shame. Just a little to help caramelize the crust. Anyone else in my camp? I do agree that maybe a pinch of sugar is great for helping to balance out the taste, but as a purist of traditional cornbread, I just can't bear to put sugar. I can't do it, y'all. But either way you do it, any and all cornbread is delicious. Okay, let's check on that cornbread in the oven. Oh my goodness. Look at this. It is perfectly golden and even. It is crispy on the top and on the edges, and on the bottom it's going to be delicious, I just know. These cracks are totally normal, very natural in cornbread. We're actually going to invert it to serve it and serve it kind of upside down. This is not for the faint of heart, but like I always say when I'm doing anything that's a little bit scary, just do it with confidence and it's going to be okay. Gorgeous. Look at that perfectly golden, crispy bottom. Now, it is not cornbread without spreading so much butter on the top of it. Butter makes everything better, especially cornbread. The cornbread is still hot, so that butter melts right into it. Listen to that. You can hear the crackle and crunch. That's when you know you've got a good piece of cornbread. It is still warm and golden. Look at this. Oh, it's gonna be so tasty. No matter how you make your cornbread is a staple Southern dish that you have got to try.